We took a week off. We needed a little vacation. You know it is summertime, but we are back and better than ever here on the Let's Debate podcast. I am your co-host, Nick Delahanty. We're happy to be back on the air tonight. We have a lot to talk about. Over a 2-week span when you have live sports, there's a lot that you kind of miss, so we're looking forward to getting back into the thick of things. So without further ado, I want to bring in my sidekick, my co-host, Kyle Delahanty. Kyle, how's it going? How did you enjoy our little mini vacation there?
Yeah, I guess you could call it a mini vacation. I mean, it was nice to have a few days off, but after this week, we're going to be back on doing our weekly shows. And for Nick, what's going on, Nick? And thank you everyone else for tuning in to Let's Debate Podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, or you're someone who just missed the past few episodes, you can always head over to our website, delahantymedia.com. We give you guys a number of different ways. You make it as convenient as possible to either watch us or listen to us. You can watch us on Facebook, YouTube. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and a number of different ways. So make sure to head over to the website and check that out. You can also find our shop on the website. We have t-shirts, long sleeves, sweatshirts, anything you could think of. A lot of nice products, so make sure to check that out. While doing so, head over to our social media. You can find us on Facebook by searching Let's Debate Podcast, Instagram at Delahanty Media, and Twitter at Let's Debate Pod. But with that being said, we have a lot of sports to talk about, so I think we should jump right into that. So I'm going to hand it back over to Nick to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. And let's get going in terms of the NBA draft. We had the NBA draft lottery, and as you're going to see on the screen, here is your official draft lottery update. And if you look, the Timberwolves, yes, the Minnesota Timberwolves came away with the number 1 overall pick. You have Golden State, Charlotte, Chicago, and Cleveland rounding out the top 5. The New York Knicks, who were projected to get the 6th overall pick, of course, in a Knicks fashion, slid 2 spots to number 8. And I'm sorry I laughed, but you know what? After the Rangers got the first pick, we knew the Knicks weren't going to get any luck. So you're there. And then the other notable, I would say, is Boston at 14, given the fact that that was not their original pick. That had to fall in the right way for them to get that pick. What did you think about Minnesota getting that number 1 overall pick? And do they stick with that pick, or do you think they look in other directions here?
I was a little surprised by Minnesota getting that. I just wasn't expecting that at all. I mean, I know they had the first pick just a few years ago when they took Karl Anthony Towns. Look, they have I would say 3 young, nice players on that team with Russell, Culver, and Towns. So they have a few pieces. They're definitely building. I don't think they could go wrong either way. They could trade the pick away. They could stick to where they are. I guess my question for you is, who do you think they take with that first pick?
That's a tough question to me because there's a couple of guys that you put in the mix. Anthony Edwards, they say he's a really good shooter. Lacks on the defensive side of the ball from what everybody says. LaMelo Ball, I don't know if anybody in their right mind wants to take a Ball at this point. The kid could be the best player in the draft, but I don't know if the headaches are worth it with the family. There's a couple of guys in the mix there. And to be quite honest with you, I don't know the right answer. Maybe Edwards because of the way the roster's shaped up. You have Russell and you have Anthony Towns, like you mentioned. But I just don't know what route you would go. I don't think they need a guard that's going to control the ball like a LaMelo Ball. So I think that Edwards is the pick here. Unless something drastic happens and they decide, maybe you take a James Wiseman and you match him up with Towns and you try to play big man ball. But I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if you have a different take on that, but to me, I think you're going to probably rank Edwards number 1 at this rate.
I find the top 3 picks being really interesting. I'm actually excited to see how it plays out because you have Edwards, you have LaMelo Ball, you have Wiseman. I think what makes it really interesting is what I said before. Minnesota has a young, nice core, and Golden State is a legitimate title contender next year. So for them to be sitting at number 2 is just crazy to me. It's tough. Like, I think the wild card in all this is, where does LaMelo Ball go? Because do you think he matches up nicely on Golden State, or do you think they have too many shooters already? Because I would say, based on mock drafts, it looks like Edwards might go number 1. I'm not sure if Russell and Ball fit well together. I think that's little too much shooting. I don't think there's enough passing involved there. Golden State, I think it would be smart for them to take Wiseman. I mean, they're missing a big man. That's the main thing they're missing. So if you could grab a young talent like him that could go a long way in the future. If it goes Edwards, Wiseman, the next pick would have to be Ball, but I'm not quite sure if Michael Jordan, the owner of Charlotte, is really going to want to deal with LeVar Ball unless he takes a step away. So, typically when you look at the draft, there's one or two, actually two or three prospects that are usually there. And you kind of have an idea who's going to go number one, but these guys are probably going to be in the top three, like last year. It's Zion, you had Ja, and you had RJ Barrett. This year it's those three. So it's gonna be fun to see how it plays out.
There's a couple of points I want to get to in what you said, because you made a lot of good points. Number one, I think Golden State trades out. I think they're looking at this from the point of, yeah, Wiseman would be that piece that you might be missing in the middle, but are they willing to risk a title contention on trying to develop him? Or are they going to ship that piece out in regards to getting a better player? Because let's face it, Curry's 31. Thompson's up there in age coming off an injury. Draymond Green is getting up there. Their window is now. So I don't know if they're really willing to risk a Wiseman coming in and trying to be that missing piece when he needs time to develop too. Everything you see and they say is that he's not ready right away to be an impact player. He'll be an impact player from what they're saying talent-wise, but the lack of time in college really did hurt him. But the guy who's interesting is Ball, because if you're looking at the list, and I have it still on the screen because I'm sure the people want to see the list as we're talking about it, if Minnesota doesn't take him at 1, Golden State, he's not a fit. Charlotte, like you said, I don't know if Jordan's willing to take that risk with him. Chicago's got Levine and White. Do they really look that way for another guard who controls the ball? Cleveland's got Sexton. Is that a match? Maybe that's where Ball falls, but you could see him falling out of the top 10 at this rate. Because if you look at the 6 through 10, Atlanta's got Trae Young. Are they going to want to take the ball out of his hands? I don't think so. The Pistons, maybe. Maybe Detroit takes them. The Knicks, who knows what the Knicks do. They might be the one to actually take them. And then Washington, you figure Wall comes back and they still have Bradley Beal, and the Suns have Booker. Are they going to want another ball-hungry guard? So the top 10 really doesn't shape up to the point where there's a team that really needs a guy like him to take over.
So I think he definitely goes soon. I haven't been the biggest LaMelo Ball fan over the years, but I think he's grown on me. I think he's a really, really good player. I was a big fan of Lonzo. I know Lonzo hasn't necessarily panned out the way that really anyone expected him to. Like, he was really good in college, and he just really hasn't really translated to the pros. And I don't know if that's because of injuries or I'm not really quite sure. I don't think he knows either. So I think LaMelo goes quick. I can't really see him going past Cleveland. I think Cleveland's a team that they kind of just need something. They need someone, and I'm not saying LaMelo Ball is gonna, sell out stadiums or arenas, I should say, but it's someone to at least put some fans in the seats. Cleveland's a dying organization right now, and I personally think if he fell to 6, I think Atlanta would grab him. I think they would try to create their own little poor man's Golden State. I really do. Between LaMelo and Trae Young, I know both of them are, pretty much ball hogs, but they're scorers, and that's a team that they have a nice young core as well. They have a ways to go. So I think LaMelo definitely goes top 10. I think he goes a lot sooner. I think he goes to 4, 5, or 6. But over time, we're going to see. And I guess you mentioned this before with Golden State trading out. I don't mean to put you on the spot because I don't know if you've thought about this yet, but if they're going to trade out, who do you think is a team that trades up? And what do you think Golden State's looking for in return?
That's an interesting question, and I didn't think about specific players, but I think Golden State's going to look for another wing or a big man that they can work with in the time being. I don't know who it may be, but like we talked about with Ball, maybe there's a team that has a piece that they're saying to themselves, we can't sign this guy long term, or we don't see the value in this guy, but other teams do. Maybe we jump up, get that pick, and reset with Ball and take that pick. That might be an option that we're not really necessarily looking at. Golden State needs one more impact player. I don't know where it's going to be from, but they tried Russell, and then they got rid of him. They have Wiggins. I don't know if that's going to pan out, when they're fully healthy. So they're an interesting team to watch. I think that the draft is going to be dictated by the Golden State Warriors because Minnesota's going to do what Minnesota's going to do unless they trade out. And then Golden State holds all the chips here. And that's going to really solidify what goes on. And let's remember, this is not a very strong draft class from past years. There's no 2 or 3 studs. Like you put John Morant in this draft, he's the consensus #1 overall pick. There's just no real star-studded power in this class. It's a really weak class. It kind of weakened over time, especially when guys have to go to college and try to showcase their skills. Because if you go to the wrong scheme or your team has a bad year, it does hurt your status over time.
Now, I guess one more question to add to that, because it just crossed my mind. Do you think there's a possibility that Minnesota grabs Wiseman and tries to kind of build their own little twin towers and tries to replicate what the Spurs did, back in like the late 90s, early 2000s? Because look, you got your shooter in Russell, you got Culver, who's your forward. What if you took a guy like Wiseman to go down low with Towns? Because Towns is a type of big man who's going to come up. He shoots threes, he can shoot mid range, so it could be good to have another big man down there.
That's a possibility I thought about. To be honest with you, I thought that it's Edwards or Wiseman. I never put Ball in that mix. And nothing against Ball, but I just think that if they're going to go with a guard, they're going to go Edwards. And if they're going to go with the big man, they're going to go Wiseman. It was never just, anything against LaMelo. But that's a possibility. They might try to bring the big play back. It's a common thing. You see teams trying to play small. I love watching Houston when they go small. I think it's the funniest thing ever. You got like 5 guards on the floor. The other team's got 3 7-footers. It's just funny to me. But that's a possibility. And that really sets up a situation for the Warriors because Edwards could be a guy that could come in and shoot the ball at a high level off the bench. That's enticing if you're the Warriors. You're looking for some bench production. You're not going to get like 35-plus minutes from all those guys anymore. You're just not. The way injuries are and whatnot, they're going to take those guys and probably give them less minutes. So if you could get a guy like Edwards, that might be a nice fill for them.
Yeah, I think the most interesting team in the draft, and then I think the most interesting team going into next year, obviously before free agency hits, has to be Golden State. The fact that they had Curry and Thompson pretty much out practically the entire year. I know Thompson was out. Curry came back a little bit or got hurt early on. But for them to have the team that they have, the talent across the board on that roster and the playoff experience that they have, and possibly adding a top draft pick or trading back and acquiring something, it's going to be interesting because they're going to be title contenders next year. If the Warriors were healthy this year, they were, I would say, probably the 3 seed in the West right now. There's actually no doubt in my mind they would have been the 3 seed, and they would have been competing for a title. So I've been saying it for months now. When I felt that they were going to be close to the top of the draft, I said it's going to be interesting. And the first thing that came to my mind was James Wiseman because that missing piece of the puzzle is that big man. So, listen, I'm excited for the draft coming up. I always watch it. But these top 3 prospects and just so happens that the teams that are up there, I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Now, let me throw a scenario at you, okay? This is just me looking at the draft board, but there's a lot of speculation that Devin Booker is not going to last long in Phoenix. He is what he is. He's a really good athlete, but there's no consensus as to whether or not Phoenix is looking to keep him long term or if they're willing to trade him. He does have the contract, the big one or whatnot, but let me pose this question to you. If Phoenix likes one of those guys at the top of the draft, do they offer Booker to get that first pick?
That's tough. I mean, the question is, do they really think that someone at the top of the draft is going to be better than what Devin Booker brings to your team? Because the kid's a superstar, and he's young, and he knows how to score. And listen, their team, I know they didn't make the playoffs, but they were the hottest team in the league in this bubble. They were 8-0. So, maybe they're getting things going. I think they would kind of be jumping the gun if they went and traded him away. I don't think they would do it. I really don't. I don't think there's anyone up there that's better than Devin Booker. And if they're going to make a trade like that, whoever they're trading with better be ready to give up practically the entire team. Like, if it's going to be the Warriors, you better be ready to give up something. So I don't see it happening. I think Phoenix just needs to keep Devin and build around him. Like, they need to find someone in this draft. What are they sitting at, number 10, I believe?
They are 10, yeah.
10. You're going to get a nice prospect. I mean, number 10 ain't going to be probably better than number 1, at least when you're looking at the prospects right now. So, yeah, I don't think they do it. Why? Do you think they would end up doing something like that?
I'm gonna play GM here for you, okay? This is just off top of my head. I'm sitting there Minnesota takes the guy that Golden State likes at number 1, regardless of who that is. They call up Phoenix. They say, look, we want Devin Booker. We'll give you both first-round picks this year because I believe they have 2 this year because this pick isn't necessarily theirs. And we'll give you Andrew Wiggins and then add some more picks. Are you doing that trade?
Oh, man. So Wiggins
and a boatload of picks.
rounders.
You get the 2 first-rounders this year, a first-rounder next year, and you get to keep the 10th pick.
I mean, listen. Well, first I'm looking right now. I want to see if they have a second
I
pick.
think so. I'm not 100% sure. Don't quote me on that. But for argument's sake, if they do, that pick goes in there. If they don't, then you match up other picks or players to match up salaries or whatever you got to do.
I mean, listen, if you're sitting there, if you get the second pick in this draft, it's either LaMelo Ball or Wiseman. You also get Wiggins. You get a boatload of picks. I don't think they could go wrong either way, I guess, looking at it that way. So that's a decision they're going to have to make. I mean, that's a tough decision. I mean, listen, Phoenix, they're in no position to just automatically contend. I mean, they obviously finished off the season hot. Like I said before, they have a nice young core, but there are ways to go. So dropping Booker hurts, but adding possibly a big prospect, Wiggins, and a few draft picks helps. So I still don't think they would do it. I don't know why. I just don't think they would. I'm not saying they would be smart or dumb to do it or not do it. I just don't think they would do it. I know the rumors right now are Golden State's going to try to package something together to get Giannis. Or is it Giannis?
Yeah, that's what I've heard
Like
too.
Yeah. So I don't see that happening either. I'm going to say Golden State sits tight. That's my prediction. As of right now, I think Golden State sits tight, and I'm going to say they take Wiseman.
That's a bold pick. I like that. My thing is seeing what they've done over the past couple of years and adding and knowing that their window is closing. I think they're going to do something big. I think they're going to trade out. Booker may be an option. I don't know. If the Suns give Booker to the Warriors, I think it's bad for the league. If Giannis goes to the Warriors, I think it's really bad for the West. I think that puts them as a clear-cut team in that conference. That just adds to what they have coming back. Overall, it's going to be interesting, but I think Golden State trades out. I don't think they're going to be picking number 2 on draft night. But before we get off the draft picks, I have one bold question for you. Okay, we're both Carolina Tar Heel fans. We got to talk about the one guy who might be a top 10 or top 20 pick in this draft. If you're looking at the draft lottery, what team makes the most sense for Cole Anthony?
Well, I know you and I have spoken a lot about Cole Anthony. When he signed with North Carolina, I know we were thrilled, but he didn't really pan out the way we thought he would. I feel like he's a little overrated, a bit injury prone. I think he's a guy who's going to slide personally. But you know who I could actually? No, I don't know if he's a fit. I was going to say you know a team I could see taking him, the Knicks, but I don't think he really fits. They have their guards. So if I'm looking at the teams here, I mean, you know what? I feel like he could fit in Detroit at 7. Maybe San Antonio at 11.
So you're going 7 to Detroit or 11 at San Antonio, but if not those, you think he slides past the top 14?
I'm just looking at fits right now. Well, I'm looking at a bunch of things. I think he was a bit overrated. I think he's a guy who needs the ball in his hands. And I think he's injury prone. And when I'm looking at, team fits here, I don't see too much. Like, I don't see him going 5 to Cleveland. We know Atlanta doesn't need him. I said the Knicks because I could kind of see them making a splash and move like that, but I don't think he fits the team. So in that case, if we're going fits here, maybe 7 to Detroit, maybe 11 to San Antonio, possibly 13 to New Orleans, but I don't really see that either. Maybe 15 to Orlando. I'm just trying to think of teams that might be in desperate need of like an actual point guard. But I'm not a huge fan of Cole Anthony. It hurts to say, but what do you think?
My personal opinion on it, and I wrote an article about it for Keeping It Heel the other day. Most mock drafts have him going anywhere from 10, which is Phoenix, to 21. My personal take, I don't think he slides past 14. I think that if he falls to the Celtics, I think the Celtics are going to jump on him, and here's why. Yeah, he didn't have such a great year in Carolina. Yeah, there are some things that when you read about him, it doesn't always necessarily add up as what you're looking for in a prospect, but the talent's undeniable. And with a coach like Brad Stevens, who I think can control him and figure out ways to utilize him, I think that they can make him fit. And maybe a bench role right away might not fit what Cole Anthony wants, but I think that coming off the bench in Boston can help him develop his overall game and give him something to work for. Let's face it, he walked into Carolina and the keys were handed to him. There wasn't anything for him to battle. There was nobody in that camp that was going to give him even an ounce of competition for that starting point guard job. But now you're looking at him and you're saying, okay, I have to compete for what I want in this league. I have to show my value. Maybe a fit like Boston would be best for him.
You know, that's a nice spot. Listen, he's going to sit behind Kemba. We know that. But you're telling me you wouldn't want to learn behind Kemba?
Yeah,
I mean, he's one of the best in the game. And like you said, Brad Stevens, he's one of my favorite coaches in the league. I mean, he's done a great job. He has a great track record from college into the NBA. And we know the Celtics are a great organization. Like, they do a really nice job with their draft picks. Like, even second rounders, they typically have a number of draft picks, and I feel they always kind of get that steal. Like, there's always a big name that they grab. So, you know what, Cole Anthony wouldn't be a nice fit on their bench as a role player for now, learning and developing from a good organization and a good coach. So I think that's extremely possible. But yeah, you know, for them to say he's fallen probably between 10 and 21, I feel pretty solid about my pick because I said 7 to Detroit, but I mentioned 11 to San Antonio, 13 to New Orleans, 15 to Orlando. And then your prediction right now is 14 to Boston. So I feel like it's all in that range. I don't really see him becoming a big top pick that we were mentioning before with Wiseman and Ball and Edwards. So even as a Tar Heel fan, I kind of forgot a little bit about Cole Anthony because, like I said, he was injured last year. He's just not one of the names that's really popping up in my head.
Oh, and it's easy to do that because he missed so much time for them. But I think that the talent's just undeniable. The way that he can play the game, they're going to look at this draft, and it's a weak draft class, and somebody's going to take a chance on him and just say, you know, we're going to take a chance on this guy and see what we can do. And I think Boston would be a nice fit because, like you said, Steven's a great coach, great organization. They seem to have their ducks in order over there in Boston, and he can help them contribute because they're looking to win, and they need some depth off the bench. Let's transition to the teams that are actually, you know, good, and we're going to talk about the NBA playoffs. We're in the thick of it right now. We have one matchup that is set for the second round, but in the East, everybody's swept except for Milwaukee. They're up 3-1 against Orlando. In the West, it's a little bit more competitive. The Lakers are up 3-1. Damian Lillard will miss that Game 5. That's big for Portland. Expect them to go home right away. And then you have Houston and OKC tied up at 2. Utah leading Denver 3-2, and then you have the Clippers after a big 154-point explosion. They have a 3-2 lead on the Dallas Mavericks. So, Kyle, what is your thought on the NBA playoffs so far? Give me your takes.
And like you mentioned before, I mean, the East was pretty clean, right? It's a ton of sweeps, and we know Milwaukee dropped that first game, but we knew that was going to be about it. It was just it was a bad game for them. So, yeah, Milwaukee's up 3-1 on Orlando. That was the 1-8 game. And then you had Miami swept Indiana. Boston swept Philly, who we're going to get to in a little bit as well. And then Toronto swept my Brooklyn Nets, which you know, if you watch the previous episodes, I felt it coming. So there's no hard feelings there, defending champs. And then in the West, you know, you have the Lakers up 3-1. Once again, that first loss in the series, we knew it was nothing. I know some people kind of jumped the gun and thought, well, maybe there's a chance. There was no chance. And there's not going to be a chance next game, especially since one of their top players is injured. But listen, Houston and Oklahoma City tied up. That's a good series. I think me and you talked about that as well in previous episodes. We knew that would probably be a good matchup. We have Utah up 3-2 on Denver. That's another good series. I could see that possibly going 7. And then the last but not least, it's one of the most interesting ones. I know LA just blew out Dallas in their previous game, but the game before that, Dallas, Luka, the way he played, I could see that possibly going 7-2. So I think that the West is a lot more interesting right now. But as the rounds go on, like we've continued to say in the previous episodes, anytime we're touching the playoff topic, this is an even playing field. We really don't know who's going to get there. So every step of the way, I don't care if there were sweeps in the East right now, the next round of games is going to be even more interesting.
Yeah, and you brought up some good points. Let's go through some of these series. So OKC and Houston. As you guys know, we recorded this episode, so there's games that are going on throughout the day. But they're tied up at 2. Russell Westbrook has not even played in this series. OKC has a little bit of momentum recently, but let's face it, if you're looking at these two teams head-to-head, you have to think that the Rockets are a little bit better, wouldn't you say, or do you not agree with that statement?
I don't know. I think I just feel like it's that whole series is so evenly played. I mean, I spoke about this in the past. I don't care who Houston has or who they don't have. I'm not big on the whole small ball play, right? And the way I think Oklahoma City has actually played better than they have throughout the series so far. So I think the series could go 7. I know Westbrook has been injured. He's just not really existent, right? So is he back yet? He's still out.
They were saying he was going to try to play in Game 5, but I don't know what the status is. They didn't give an update as of when we're recording. So
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. He's non-existent. He's not playing, and even if he plays, is he going to be healthy? And someone like him, you need him. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of the small ball. So when you're playing in a system like that, I just think it's dumb. Like, I don't think you're giving yourself a real chance to win there. And if one of your best players is out, I think Oklahoma City might actually get out of this round and advance.
Now, let me ask you before we move on, which team out of those two do you think gives the Lakers a better series?
Well, I got to go Oklahoma City. I have to because I don't like small ball. Westbrook's not healthy. I just think Oklahoma City is the better team right now, which is crazy because they were the most shocking team to me to get into the playoffs. But it just so happens that that's how the series is going right now. Houston's a team that traded away Clint Capella, their big man. Westbrook's hurt. I think if Houston had Clint Capella still, I think if Houston had Westbrook healthy, like they did in the beginning of the season, going into the season, I thought Houston was a team that would be advancing. But the way it is right now, I got to say Oklahoma City gives them a better shot, even though I don't think Oklahoma City even gives them much of a shot. I still think LA is going to, give them a spanking. I really do.
I personally think that Oklahoma City matches up better with the Lakers, and here's why. Steven Adams is a better matchup against Anthony Davis than anything or anybody that the Rockets have on their roster. Oklahoma City has good guard play. That's something that, you have LeBron, but he's playing forward. If you have good guards, they become a little bit of a mismatch. That's why LA lost that first game because, let's face it, Lillard and McCollum outplayed the Lakers guards. It was simple. LeBron did what he could do. Davis is Anthony Davis, but their guards were better than the Lakers guards. So I think in terms of matching up, Oklahoma City is probably a tad bit better than Houston in regards to matching up with LA, but I still think LA in 5, if that even goes to 5. They might even sweep that, but we all know if you get a little ahead of yourself, anybody can win on any given day. But another series that's really good is that Denver-Utah series, and you have two guys who a lot of people don't talk about in the media, but now they're getting a lot of headlines, one for each team, which I want your opinion on how they've been playing. It's been fun to watch them put up 40 to 50 points a night.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that series is one of the better ones. And we spoke about that in the past as well. They're just very evenly matched teams. And there's a number of good players on each of those teams. Denver with Jamal Murray, Paul Millsap, Jokic, and Utah. I thought the addition of Mike Conley was huge at the beginning of the year. You're adding Conley to a team with Mitchell and Gobert. So to see those two players putting up the points that they are, I think it's making the series even more interesting than I thought it was going to be, which I thought it was going to be pretty interesting. I think it's going to end up going 7. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I could see 7 too. I think it's good for basketball. I think that was such a great matchup. I wish we would have had it later on when there was a little more intensity. It's fun to watch those two teams. There's a lot of talent on both sides. And I think that if you're looking at it from a playoff perspective in the first round, this was the best matchup we got. And you could say what you want about
Yeah,
the Clippers and Dallas, and we'll get to them in just a moment. But I think that overall, if you had a matchup head to head, these two teams definitely take the top spot in terms of matchup because it's been a fun series, and you don't know who's going to win on a nightly basis. They're just that even.
exactly. So I guess I want to ask this question, but I think we should jump into LA Dallas, and then I'll come back to the question that I wanted to ask. So, speaking of Dallas and LA, I guess who do you think wins that series? And then I'll ask you the question that I wanted to.
All right. So after Game 5, I'm going LA. I don't think they lose Game 6. I think that the nail in the coffin was Game 5. Dallas had a nice run. Luka's been incredible, but without Porzingis healthy and Luka's even banged up, I think that now that Paul George seems to be back, I don't know if you want to call it back, it was one performance, but I just think they're too much for Dallas to handle, especially if they could get hot at the same time.
Yeah, I think Dallas, there's too much on Luka right now, and I don't think he has enough of a supporting cast right now with Kristaps Porzingis being out. So I think LA takes it as well. It's more likely to go 6. I would love for it to go 7. I think there's a possibility of it going 7, considering it's 3-2 right now. So it may finish up in 6, may go 7. But with LA playing the way that they're playing at the last game, if they continue that, let's say they end the series in 6, they're moving on. Who do you think wins the Denver-Utah game? And then whoever wins that, do you think they have a shot against LA?
I think either team, regardless, has a chance at LA, especially if they struggle the way they did early on in the series. Paul George is a question mark. Regardless of how you want to look at it, he is. He cited in his press conference after the game anxiety and things about being in the bubble, and I understand it. It's got to be hard on him, and you wish him well because you obviously know these people are human beings first, but I just think that either team has the talent to keep up with them, and I think it's going to be tough for LA because, let's face it, you're trying to look ahead to your ultimate matchup with the Lakers if you get there. But how far ahead could you look without getting swept or getting shocked in a series? There's a lot of good teams in the West. So I think that regardless of who plays LA, I think it goes 6, possibly 7. I think the Clippers have an upper hand. I think George finally figured it out, hopefully, because I think it's better for basketball if he does. But I wouldn't be surprised to see one of those teams give them a scare.
Yeah, I think LA is probably the better team out of those 3. I expect LA to beat Dallas, and then I expect LA to beat either Denver or Utah. But I do think it's going to be a nice series because they're so even. I think LA has a better roster. I think they have a better team. But like we've said in the past, it's still an even playing field. It's not like LA is this standout team and they're going to run through anyone they run through or they play. And that goes for every team in the league right now that's in the playoffs. So, yeah, I could see LA moving on. I'm gonna sit here and say, I'm trying to think of who I think is going to win, Utah or Denver. I feel like Denver's a bit of like choke artist in the playoffs. They choked last year. So I'm gonna say Utah. I think Utah moves on, and then I think the Clippers knock out Utah.
I have to agree with you there, especially given that Utah's up 3-2, a little more leeway in regards to getting them to the next round. You got to win one of the next 2. I think that Utah could definitely take care of that. But again, I think that overall, I think it's going to be LA and LA in the Western Conference Finals, unless something crazy happens. Injuries, COVID-19. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But again, those are 2 things that you have to take into consideration. But again, we're situating ourselves to look at a potential LA versus LA Western Conference Finals. I think that it's what everybody eventually wants.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, that's the series. That could actually be the finals. Like, I'm not sure if the finals are going to even be better than that, right? You have 2 loaded teams, arguably the 2 best teams in the league, and they're taking on each other from the same city. I would have loved to see that in LA, but unfortunately, with the situation we're in right now, they had no choice during the bubble. So yeah, I think that's the Western Conference Finals. Do you think your predictions that you gave like a month ago are still the same on the Eastern Conference side? Like, do you think? I'm sure we both had. Well, actually, I think I had Philly moving on. I think I had Philly moving on, but I think you had Boston. I think you had Boston, Toronto. So now that that's actually going to happen, has your mind changed on who you had going to the Eastern Conference Finals from that series?
I believe I had Milwaukee and Boston.
Boston, I think.
I'm pretty sure of it. I got to
Yeah.
go back in the tape, but I'm pretty sure of it. I didn't trust Philly, to be quite honest with you. I just think that the Celtics, even without Hayward now, were the better team, especially now without Simmons. But again, I'm confident in those picks. I think it's still going to be Milwaukee and LA Clippers. I just have a feeling about it. Nothing against LeBron. I know a lot of people want to see him in the finals, and he's been playing good. He's been playing good basketball. Can't take it away from him. But I just think that Kawhi's going to come out of nowhere and just find a way to push the Clippers ahead.
Okay. Well, since I brought up Philly, we might as well start talking about how they just fired their head coach. So if I'm not sure if the people watching are aware, but the Philadelphia Phillies fired their coach Brett Brown after I believe it was 7 seasons as the head coach. Listen, he had a losing record, but he's had a winning season the past 3 years. So that's really what kept his job alive. We know he was a big piece to the trust the process, and I don't think that's something you just throw away in the trash. Like, they did turn around their franchise with a few of those draft picks that they made. And the names I'm focusing on are Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. And listen, I've said the past few years, Philly has had arguably one of the best lineups in basketball last year and this year. If you look at the guys who were in their starting 5 the past few years, they should have done better than they did. Unfortunately for them, this year, Ben Simmons got hurt. I think it would have been much more of a competitive series if Ben Simmons had played, but he didn't, so they got swept by the Boston Celtics. And I know the topic, we wanted to talk about this topic, but the main question was going to be who deserves more of the blame. Is it Brett Brown or is it the players that, he coached? So you want to give your answer for that?
I want to go into a little bit of Brown first. 7 seasons as the Sixers head coach, 221 and 334 overall record. That's a 391 winning percentage. And let's remember, he was on those teams that were tanking. He was the head guy on those teams. So you have to take that into consideration. 58 years old now. Really couldn't figure it out with this team. But there's a couple of things that I have to point out in this discussion. Number one, I think his stay lasted too long. I think that they got stale, and I think that it's just a matter of they need a new face. Number two, they made the wrong decision in letting Jimmy Butler walk out the door. Jimmy Butler had inclination that it wasn't going to work, and I think that all this combined, you have to look at it and say, is this really worth keeping this team together? Embiid's never played more than 64 games in a season. Simmons is a guy who has a lot of talent, but let's face it, he's not the best shooter in the world. At what point do you say to yourself, is it the coach or is it the guys we have in place? Are they just not gelling? Is this roster what we thought it was? And at what point do you say to yourself, okay, when and why do we hit the reset button? And I think that the answer is I would hit the reset button now. There's not a coach out there in the NBA searching wise, unless you could get Greg Popovich, that I would bring in to coach this team. I just think that they're overdue for a little bit of a overhaul. And, it didn't work. The process didn't work. And it's okay. But overall, I just think that they were looking for Kobe and Shaq, and they didn't get that. And it's okay. It happens. But, it kind of is disappointing considering that they tanked for so long to get those picks.
Yeah, I think it's a mixture of a little bit of both. I think you have Brett Brown, who, you're right. I mean, he was part of the rebuild process, and then he got things going, but he can never get over that hump. But he's also dealing with players who are injury prone. You have a guy like Ben Simmons who's running around with Kendall Jenner. He's not focused on the games. He's injured this year. He's actually injury prone as well. He missed his entire rookie season. So you're dealing with that. They got rid of Jimmy Butler. And listen, Jimmy Butler gets a lot of crap from a lot of people over the years, right? He talks. He thinks he's better than he is. He's been right about the organizations that he's played for. And now he found a place where he feels the culture is right in Miami. They want to win. They're doing things right. And look, they're playing great. They've shocked the basketball world. No one expected them to be playing the way that they're playing right now. Like, I remember at the beginning of the season, I thought maybe they'd be a 6 or 7 seed. I believe they were the 4 or 5 seed, and they're in the second round already after a clean sweep. And you know what? I don't know if they'll beat Milwaukee in the second round, but they're gonna compete with them. So them getting rid of Jimmy Butler, or at least not doing enough to keep him was wrong on their part. And I think signing Tobias Harris to the contract they signed him to was a complete waste too, because he is not worth that money. So you're investing in the wrong players. I'm not going to sit here and say Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid should be traded away or that we shouldn't trust the process. I do think they're extremely talented. They need to find the right coach, and I believe their GM came out the other day and said they're not looking to trade either of them. They're going to try to build around them. So they need to find the right coach. Now, if they bring in another coach and it doesn't work out there, then you got to start pointing fingers at the players. So it's a little bit of both. But I just think they should have done more these past few years. I mean, with the lineups that they've had, the lineup that they had this year, even without Simmons, like they had a nice lineup. You had Josh Richardson, you had Al Horford, Tobias Harris, Joel Embiid. To get swept, I don't know. I don't think there's an excuse for that, and I think that's why they felt it was time to let Brett Brown go.
Horford's another guy. And you mentioned Tobias Harris, and I agree with you 110%. But Horford's another guy that hasn't lived up to the contract they gave him either. And he was great in Boston. He's been great pretty much everywhere he's gone, but he hasn't been good there. My question to you, it's more of an open-ended type of thing. But what's the difference between this Sixers team and the Heat team that Jimmy Butler's on now? There's one major difference between the two teams.
Was it coaching? Eric Spoelstra's just a better coach than Brett
Okay,
Brown.
so there's two things. I jumped the gun there. Okay, two things. But the main thing that I'm thinking of is...
Oh, shooting.
Well, that too. But the
scorers.
Their young talent is a lot different than the Sixers. You see those guys, they're hustling on the floor. They're doing the little things. I feel like they're a little more hungry than guys like Simmons and Embiid. And nothing against either one because I think they're both talented. I love watching Joel Embiid play. When he's mentally checked into the game, he's a fun player to watch. But I just feel like the Heat have found guys that they might not be your top number 1 or number 2 overall picks, but they're guys that came in, fit the system, developed over time, and continue to want to be better and grow. And Butler's a big piece of that because I think Butler's pushing them like, this isn't how it's going to fly. Butler had an audition in Philly, and if he liked it there and he liked what he saw, he would have stayed. If he would have thought that Embiid and Simmons were going to be the factors that were going to get him a championship, he was going to stay. But he didn't see it, and I think that that's a warning sign. And now that you're getting rid of Brown, I think that they have to try to do something. I don't know if you trade one or both of them, you try to unload Harris's contract or Horford or I don't know what you do. But I think that they need a drastic change, and I think they're afraid to do it.
You made a good point, and we almost said hungry at the same time because you mentioned young players. I was like, yeah, they're hungry. You could just tell. The young core that Miami has. I think it's a mixture of the culture. Like Miami just has a winning culture, and that's because Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra, those guys have been doing it for so long. They know what it takes, right? And their ownership knows that as well. So there's the culture. You have the young players. They're hungry. And I think a big part of that is what I mentioned about Jimmy Butler, and you mentioned it as well. Jimmy Butler, he's been right this entire time. He went to Minnesota, and he talked about young guys like Wiggins and Karl-Anthony Towns. They're not hungry. They were not hungry. And the culture wasn't there. Then he goes to Philly. You have Simmons. You have Embiid. They weren't hungry. The culture's not there. But now he's in Miami, and he's like, this is the place I've been wanting to go the whole time. And that's why he signed there, because he could tell they're all about winning. They're about bringing in the right guys and winning games. So, I'm not completely giving up on Philly. Do I think they ever get a title with Simmons or Embiid if things continue the way that they are? No. Do I think they could ever get to the finals if maybe they find the right coach who can kind of snap it into them? Yes, but there's something about Simmons. I don't even think it's so much Embiid. I think Embiid is hungry, but there's just something that's not clicking there. I think Simmons isn't hungry. I just feel like he's a complainer. I feel like he's always hurt. I don't feel like his head's ever in the game. I really don't. I can't see him carrying a franchise to a championship. I just can't. I can't see it happening.
I have to agree with you there. I'm not sold on Simmons. I like Embiid a lot more than I like Simmons in terms of keeping him for a franchise, but their roster is so constrained now with all the contracts that it's going to be hard for them to do things in the future unless they shape things up in Philly. But now, moving on to our other coach who got fired just 2 weeks ago, Nate McMillan got a contract extension with the Pacers. The Pacers go into the playoffs, they get swept. Nate McMillan is out of a job, fired after 4 years at the helm. 183 wins compared to 136 losses, 574 winning percentage. Pretty good for a head coach. Had 42 or more wins in each season as the main guy. And his 3-16 playoff record, I think it's mostly about the playoffs. You know, you could say what you want. He didn't have Oladipo. He didn't have Sabonis. There's different factors that played in, but overall, over the 4 years, it was simple. He couldn't get a job, couldn't get it done in the postseason.
Yeah, it's simple. He couldn't get it done where it really matters. I mean, look, he did a nice job in 4 years, right? Winning record, he's playoff appearances. But when you run into this year, I know he dealt with some of his top players not being there, but you don't have a good history in the playoffs. And then you go and get swept in a 4 and 5 seeded game. I don't know. I mean, I think they probably felt a little bit more confident about it, right, to give them that extension a month or so ago. But I think they should have held on it. They should have held on it to see how he performed in the playoffs this year. I don't think there's much to talk about exactly as to, like, is it the team's fault? Is it his fault? He just didn't do his job as his coach. I mean, you need to win in the playoffs. And we see that a lot. You know, this is very off topic, but when I think of a coach who's always done well in the regular season but just couldn't get done in the playoffs, I think to football and I think of Marvin Lewis. I mean, we talked about him for years. After every season, we'd be like, do you think he gets fired? No, he'll be back. He'll be back. It was like 20 years of just losing in the playoffs. So, listen, if you can't get it done in the playoffs, to me, you got to go. You got to get the job done in the playoffs. You at least got to put up some type of a fight. So, yeah, that's my take on McMillan.
That's a good trivia question. Who has a better winning percentage in the postseason, Marvin Lewis or Nate McMillan? That might be close. I don't know what Marvin Lewis's playoff record is, but we'll have to look that up. Another thing that I think
I'm almost positive. I'm pretty sure he's winless.
He's winless. I got to look that up, but
I think he's 0-6. But we'll talk about it.
We'll figure this out. But while we're on the topic of McMillan, I think that also the possibility of them bringing in a coach like a Mike D'Antoni was intriguing to them. So I think that the way things are shifting, if they lose that series to Oklahoma City, D'Antoni's going to be looking for a new job. And Indiana might be that job. He might not be on the market very long.
I think D'Antoni would be a nice fit. I mean, listen, D'Antoni's kind of like a guy. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank right now. Who did the Knicks sign?
Tom Thibodeau.
Thibodeau. I knew it was a T. And I know Tom Thibodeau because he talked about him a ton of times. But him and Thibodeau remind me a lot of each other because they're guys who, listen, they could get the job done, but they bounce around so much. So I think it's a nice piece. Like, I think D'Antoni could get Indiana back into the playoffs, maybe compete a little bit, but I don't think he takes them over the top. I think they have a ways to go for that. Like, they have some nice players, right? Sabonis, you have Oladipo, you have Turner. They have some nice pieces. I don't think D'Antoni's a bad choice for them. But since we're on the topic of coaches, do you think the Nets actually have a serious shot of pursuing Greg Popovich to go there?
You read my mind, so I'm I don't know if I should be concerned or ecstatic that we're on the same page here. I was going to ask you the same thing as a Nets fan in here, but I think it's realistic. I don't think that the rumors are false in any which way. Remember, the Nets have Sean Marks running the helm, a former San Antonio Spurs guy. I could see it happening, and as scary as it may be, Pop might be wanting a change and might look to do it. I would say there's at least a 50% chance of at least them talking about it. I would say the chances I don't know if my possibility of it happening are up there yet, but from what I've been seeing, I wouldn't be surprised by it. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't be shocked to see him coaching the Nets next year.
You know, I wouldn't be shocked if Popovich went to the Nets. I think I'd be surprised because as a fan of a basketball team, especially with the way the Nets are looking right now, kind of be like a dream come true to have someone like that leading the team. And I know the Nets have not had a coach like Popovich in their franchise history, and that's safe to say because Popovich is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime coach to have on your team. There's not many like him. But I think Popovich, look, he did his time in San Antonio. There would be no hard feelings if he left. He won them titles. He had them in the playoffs for 2 decades straight. They obviously didn't make the playoffs for the first time in about 2 decades this past year, well, this year. But I think Popovich might be looking at the Nets and saying, you know what, that's a new challenge. It's in New York. What would it be like to bring a title to New York, coaching guys like Kyrie and Durant and DeAndre Jordan and the young core that they have? Guys like LeVert, guys like Joe Harris. They have a nice core. And I think the way that the Nets played, I know they got swept by Toronto, but you know what? They had some competitive games there. They played well enough to lock themselves into the playoffs. So it's not a bad fit. I think it'd be a great fit. I would be ecstatic as a fan, and I'm hoping it happens. I do think there's a 50-50 chance, but as a fan, you can only hope at this point and try to be somewhat optimistic.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it long term for Pop, he's not going to be coaching for much longer. He's up there in age. I believe he's 71. But if you're trying to win now and you're trying to solidify, I don't even think he has to solidify his role as one of the greatest coaches of all time. But if you're trying to go out on top, you might take an offer to go to the Nets because look at the Spurs roster. They're not ready to win anytime soon. So it'll be interesting to see if Pop does make the transition to Brooklyn. It would be nice. I would like to see that. I think I definitely would catch more Nets games if that was the case. I like watching Pop. I love what he brings to the table. I think he's a great investment for a team who's in need of a coach to lead that very talented roster. Now, we have 2 more topics to talk about today. The first one we want to get into is the NHL Playoffs update. As you can see on our screen, we have the current playoff matchups, and I want your opinion on it because I like it. I like how they reseed. I think it's really a nice feature, but just to go over it a little bit, Vegas and Vancouver tied up at 1. Dallas is up 2-0 on Colorado. Then you have the Islanders up 1-0 on Philly, and Tampa over Boston. Tampa and Boston tied up at 1, excuse me, on that one. But again, I think that there's a lot of fun matchups here. I think that there's a lot of intense hockey action. I've been tuning in and out. I haven't really sat down to watch 3 periods. What I do is I usually watch a period here, watch a period there of different matchups. But what do you think about the NHL playoffs so far?
The NHL playoffs are always great. I love them. I'm in the same boat as you. I haven't been able to sit down and really watch all. I know just a few nights ago I sat down and watched the Stars game because, like I said, they're the team I've been rooting for. So I was happy to get home at a certain point, and they were on late, and I was able to catch, I think, the last 2 periods, which were nice. But listen, the Flyers Islanders series, that's a local series, right? And the Islanders have been playing really well. I think they're playing better than the Flyers, and I know they smacked them around the other night. They won 4-0. So even as a Devils fan, it's nice to see the Islanders playing as well as they are because I don't really look at them as big as – I can't speak right now – as big of a rival as I do the Rangers. So, listen, the Islanders are playing well. Tampa, Boston, I feel like those are 2 teams that just are always in the playoffs at this point. And both games have been very competitive. I mean, it's only been one – each team has won by only 1 goal in those 2 games. The Knights and Canucks, those games have been blowouts. We know it's tied at 1, but the games haven't been close. I know the series is close, but the games haven't been. And like I said earlier, I've been rooting for the Stars. So for them to be up, 2-0 and to see the scores the way that they were the past 2 games, Stars continue to advance. Don't really care much for who comes out of the East, but overall, it's been great. It's just the hockey playoffs are always great.
I actually watched a little of that Stars game, too. It was late. I was, looking for something to watch. I'm like, oh, there's hockey on. I'll watch it. And again, like you said, I like that Islander series. I think it's good for the local people to see that. So, of course, you root for those teams to kind of advance. It's fun watching it with not having a team. There's no ties. Like, even if you have a team and they're not in the playoffs and there are rivals in there, like, I could watch and I could just watch and enjoy what's going on. There's no ties to me. So I like that factor of it. But like you said, it's always exciting, and it just seems like there's always so much action that goes along. And we're going to continue to give you some updates on the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs as they roll along. And our final topic of the day, we finally got here. It seems like we talked a lot about the NBA today, but the NFL training camp is underway. A couple of things I want your opinion on. And again, as we recorded, there are a couple of things that did happen already that we could talk about. The Giants said they want to take the red jersey off of Daniel Jones. They want to see him get hit a little bit in training camp because there's no preseason games. When I first saw that, I thought That's a pretty bad idea, especially given that we're Jets fans and we know how quarterbacks are fragile and could be lost at any moment. What's your take on that? You think that's a smart approach from the Giants, even if it's a little contact?
No, I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I mean, if I was Daniel Jones, I wouldn't be too happy about that either. Listen, your quarterback's going to get hit, but I don't think you need, and we know he's going to get hit because that offensive line ain't that great. But to get it started already, like I just don't. I'm not in agreement with that at all. And if I was a Giants fan, I would not be happy about that either. If he gets hurt, there goes your season. And who knows what type of injury it could be. Like, that could be a long-lasting. We don't really know. So I would not be happy if the Jets took the red jersey off of – well, I don't even know if they used the red jersey. They might use a different color. They might use red. I know that's, like, the thing in the NFL. But if they take the red jersey off Darnold, I would not be happy about that. So I just don't think it's smart.
I agree with you. I don't think it's smart either. Big blow to the Giants. Their highly touted draft pick, Xavier McKinney, fractured his foot. He's a guy that I liked out of college. I love that pick for the Giants. Really disappointing to see that he went down with this injury. He'll probably be out for a very extended period of time with it.
Yeah, it's not a good injury to have, especially this early on in his career. I mean, if you're going to have the injury, you might as well have it early on in the season so that maybe you can get back later in the season. This early on in his career before it started is not good. And I was in favor of that pick as well. It reminded me a lot of when they took Landon Collins in the second round, another Bama safety who worked out really well for them, but they decided not to pay him, or he got a bigger offer from Washington, so he headed out the door. But you know what? The Giants, and it's a blow to the Giants' defense because they're not a very good defense. I mean, I know at the safety position they should be all right because they still have a guy like Jabril who's another young, promising player, but that's a big blow to them.
Now, before we get into any other final NFL thoughts, the Jets had a scrimmage where the second team basically slapped around the first team. How could you ever be surprised by that? But Le'Veon Bell did not really participate in the scrimmage. He was not very happy about it. He took to social media to say he needs the reps to get ready. And without the preseason, number one, it's weird without the preseason. But also, how do they expect these guys to get ready? You're basically asking them to get hurt. So it's a fine line. We see it in baseball, how many guys are going down, getting injured. It's a weird line to walk, but I think the Jets are being way too cautious with their star running back.
Yeah. Listen, you don't want your quarterback to get hit, but you need your running back taking some bumps. I mean, that's part of the game. And if they're not going to have preseason games, he should be going even harder right now. You know, and to me, it just, I'm not shocked by that at all because, you know what? Gase came out a few weeks ago and said he didn't utilize him the right way. Listen, we don't need you to come out and say that. We know that. Okay, so why don't you start utilizing him and actually using the guy a little bit? Like, it's not going to help out your team. First of all, you're not a good team as is. He's the best player on the field, on the offensive side of the ball. We need him to have the ball. And he's a guy who took off 2 years ago. He played last, and they might have used him a lot at the beginning of the season, but they didn't use him much late in the season, the way they should have at least. Now you're not using him to start off this season. I just feel like you're putting the guy in a hole. And you've said it a bunch of times. He probably won't even be on the team next year. So this is all part of Gase's little plan, just not utilizing the right way, piss him off, and then have more of a reason to let him go.
That's how the Jets work. And then they make the media spin it the way they want so the fans...
Make him the victim.
So
or,
the fans
the
believe...
Jets the victim.
Exactly. As we head closer to the kickoff of football, what are you looking for? What are your thoughts? You think we're going to actually have a season? What's going through your mindset here?
I mean, I think they've gotten this far through training camp, so I think there's going to be a season, but it's, you know, I've been talking to a lot of my friends about this and just talking about life in general. Usually around this time of the year, you could feel the fall coming around, right? You have kids going back to school, teachers going back to work. There's preseason games. You could just feel that weather coming in, and we know up in North Jersey that football weather is like, and I love it. It's like my favorite time of the year. It doesn't feel like that this year. Like I'm not participating in fantasy football, which is crazy because I'm a huge fantasy football guy all the time too. It's weird. I want them to have a season. I'm looking forward to the season, but there's just a weird feel to it. And honestly, it just like hit me when you said before there's no preseason. I was like, oh my God, there's no preseason. Like that just hit me. Because I think my mindset is just getting used to this way of living, unfortunately, as of right now, that you just forget. Like, you know that sports haven't really been around much, so it's just the norm for them to not have preseason football. So overall, um, I ramble on a lot, but I want to see football. I'm excited for football, but it just, I guess until it starts, I'm not going to really feel that feeling that I typically do. What do you think?
I'm in that same boat. Number one, I'm not doing fantasy football. You're lucky I did fantasy baseball this year, but it was already determined. I had my draft back in January before this even happened, so this was something that was already there. Fantasy football, I took the year off. I'm like, I'm not paying, and then my luck, everybody I draft would end up getting the virus or get hurt. So for me, it wasn't worth it. But again, it just doesn't feel right. Like you said about schools, like y'all know I'm a teacher. I say it all the time, but it doesn't feel like the start of the school year. Like it just doesn't. It doesn't feel like that full time, and I'm sure over time it will get there. But as of now, it's just a weird feeling, and we're in a weird predicament in the world. And I just hope we have a season. I do. We need it. Everybody loves football. It's a way to keep us together. I don't know if fans are going to be allowed. I don't know what the precautions are going to be, but football is good for us. And even though the Jets get our stress levels up, we're trying to inch closer to regular life. And I think we all took that for granted over time that, we had it so good. It's just the way it was. There's so much to watch and so much fun and entertainment. And now you have this, and it's just a blow to everybody's normal daily routine. So, yeah, I hope we have it. And, again, it all depends on how the world continues to try to get over this virus that has really swept the nation over the last couple of months. Now, we're wrapping up on time here. Final thoughts on today's show.
I think talking about multiple different sports has really added to the show. I find it's always been fun, but it's just there's so much to talk about and so much to touch on that it's really, in my opinion, just added to the show. I think it brings to the next episode just uncertainty, and it makes it extremely unpredictable because when we first got going on this show, we were trying to think of topics like a week in advance and debatable topics and just things that really in-depth sports fans talk about. And now it's kind of just, we'll get on here and then news will break, 20 minutes before we go live or we're recording or whatever it is. And it's like, okay, I think we should throw that in there. So I think the fact that it's unpredictable has added to it. And not really knowing what you're going to talk about in the future, it kind of just is on the spot. You got to know what to talk about and know sports. And we're talking about so many different topics. It's just enjoyable. What do you think?
I agree with you there. First and foremost, usually around Sunday or Monday, because we normally go on Thursday, I'll start to look at topics that cover the weekend and whatnot. And I write them down, and then I say to myself, you know what? I'm going to text Kyle these first thing Tuesday morning when I think about them, and I'm going to see what he says about the agenda. And they could always, it's subject to change, obviously. But by Tuesday, I find that everything on that agenda is not relevant anymore. So I'm going to have to change that date to write down things. But again, like you said, it's so unpredictable, but it's so much fun for us because we could give our opinion on different things, and we hope that you join in on that conversation as well. Again, like Kyle said at the beginning of the show, we don't have to beat the bush with it. Social media is on the screen if you're watching this live. DelahantyMedia.com is the way to go. Everything you need is there. We make it as easy as possible for you to find our show. We'll be back next week, obviously, as always, and we hope that there's a lot more interesting sports topics for us to talk about. So with that being said, that's going to wrap up the Let's Debate podcast for today. That's Kyle Delahanty. I pointed to the right side today, and I'm Nick Delahanty, and we will catch you guys next week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and enjoy some sports while you're at it.
Thanks, guys, for tuning in. Like Nick said, head over to the website. We make it extremely convenient for you guys, and we'll see you guys